Sonic the Hedgehog. What can be said in an intro about any Sonic game that hasn't been said before ad nauseum? He had a rocky start in 3D, then he had a few bad games, and then the franchise was saved by Mania, right? That's how you begin an original video about Sonic, right? Haha, these are things I know. I know about the Sonic cycle. These are things I know. No, in all seriousness, Sonic Forces seems to be the antithesis of Sonic Mania, and what I mean by that is that while Sonic Mania was passionately developed for a fun, nostalgia-tugging experience with tight original gameplay components, Sonic Forces feels like more of the same old stuff you've already done before. I hate to say it, but after so many good games this year, Forces is plainly average to the fullest extent. Much like Bubsy, the Bobcat just wants to be dead, there feels like there was a lot of missed potential to fully flesh out kinda interesting gameplay components to develop into something truly substantial and nuanced. See, I'm a huge Sonic fan, and I will defend Sonic's honor with my life, to the point of calling Rise of Lyric just mediocre in the end. I grew up with Sonic Adventure and still hold the franchise near and dear. But after Generations and Mania, I couldn't escape the feeling that Forces just retreaded on old ground again and again to a detrimental extent. Don't get me wrong, on its own merits, it's fine. The boost formula is fairly well executed, and there are some parts I found joy in. It's essentially a game that's neither bad or really great. It's a passable Sonic game, another forgettable game to add to the pile of games I've already played. Is that a compliment even? Let's get the story out of the way first, which is by far Force's strongest aspects. The narrative kicks off in Green Hill Zone as Sonic is just doing his thing, being fast and dismantling robots, until Eggman appears at the end of the level. He's recruited the ghosts of Sonic's past, like Chaos, the confusingly written name on paper when referring to him in the Chows, Sonic the Hedgehog, the ultimate life form, TM, Zavik, the red demon you forgot about, and Metal Sonic, the character you'd always pick in Sonic Adventure Battle 2. Determined, Sonic gears up to combat his demons, but then Eggman summons a new villain, Eggman's own original Sonic character, Infinite. With Infinite's power, the villains beat the absolute shit out of Sonic, a symbolic representation of what internet discourse has done to the blue blur. But it's not all sunshine and rainbows, as silly as it might be to see Sonic get thrown into walls and smashed into the ground, because Sonic actually dies. That's right, folks. In the opening of Forces, Tails watches in horror as Sonic the Hedgehog is brutally murdered. Talk about an opening. Anyways, 6 months pass, and Eggman, without a Sonic to stop him, basically succeeds in what he's always wanted to do: conquer the world. Most of the population has either been killed or enslaved in the process. Chaos reigns supreme as the Death Egg towers overhead of the world's ruins. I kind of really like this approach to exposition. You often see the villain trying to take over the world, but eventually he fails at the end through some final confrontation with the hero. It's the classic hero's journey, you know? But Forces flips this narrative structure on its head and begins in an Eggman-ruled dystopia. Something I don't think we've ever seen before. Sure, this isn't a new idea in terms of innovating a storyline, but for Sonic, it most certainly is, and it immediately engages you with what's going on, regardless of how corny everything might feel initially. Nevertheless, after this time, a small group of resistance fighters has formed to take down Eggman's regime and liberate his territories. These consist of Sonic characters of the past, like Knuckles, Silver, Amy, Espio, and so on, but surprisingly not Big the Cat, which is a little upsetting. The game follows the Resistance, aided by your own Sonic OC and Classic Sonic, as they try to thwart Eggman's plans and rescue Sonic, who, by the way, is still alive and was tortured by Eggman as a prisoner just for the fun of it. Holy shit, that's dark even for a Sonic game. Gone are the days of swearing to be edgy, and here are the days of Sonic games delving into war atrocities and the dangers of fascism. It's so weirdly dark, and I love that. I was really enthralled with the plot in a weird way, as the characters are well written to convey some intense emotions of despair and whatnot in this world of destruction and depression. This is not the game to play if you're looking for a happy-go-lucky platformer starring a blue rodent that runs fast. Forces really does go all out with taking itself seriously and developing some darker themes that don't feel too contrived. Yeah, the dialogue has some unintentionally hilarious moments and other somewhat comical scenes that involve great voice acting, but for the most part, it succeeds in being serious and focused on a surreal situation of Eggman's rule gone wrong and truly evil. It's weird coming off the coattails of watching the Sonic Boom cartoon where the same voice actors were given a script that is anything but serious. That show constantly had self-deprecating humor and pop culture references that actually worked. These narrative structures are two sides of the same coin, and if I'm honest, I do prefer more lighthearted stories that are self-aware. However, when it works, and it definitely works in Forces. I do also really like that we get to see more villains from the franchise, like Shadow the Hedgehog and Chaos, regardless of how much it might initially feel like nostalgia pandering. As for the presentation, I think it's pretty good, especially on the PS4. Even though I like the portability of the Switch, I like having Forces in 60 FPS, so I prefer it on the PS4 and PC. Most of everything is textured well. The grass of Green Hill Zone looks nice, and most of the environments have quite a bit of detail in the background and level design. And the enemies are modeled well, with having quite a bit of nice shading and color. Models of the Sonic characters are great in cutscenes and in gameplay, so I don't really have any complaints there. The only issue is that some of the animations look a bit off. When Sonic jumps and goes into a ball, it looks a bit weird. The same can be said for the ring collecting, ring models, and when you lose rings in general. I don't know what it is, but it simply doesn't look right. It's not something that ruins my experience, but there's a lot of little visual shortcomings that add up where sometimes models can look amateur or almost unfinished. It's weird to come from a stage where there are models that have good tonal range to some cutscenes where shadows are sharper and contrasting. The way characters move in cutscenes can also look janky and robotic, which takes you out of the pretty decent narrative. It's off-putting to see such unprofessional design, and this makes me feel like, again, Sonic Team rushed out another project to meet a deadline in time. Not gonna lie, these cutscenes give me a weird Sonic 06 vibe, but rather than being somewhat unintentionally funny, it's more frustrating than anything that Forces could have been so much better. By the same token, the music is sadly not for the most part. Yes, you have some rockin' remixes of White Jungle and Shadow's theme, but I think I only love them as much as I did purely due to nostalgia. I don't remember the tunes of many other tracks, and even then I don't feel compelled to go back and re-listen to any of them. Plus, I'm not a fan of the more electronic, bass-heavy music personally, so they didn't really appeal. I felt like most were too loud than anything, and felt too musically busy with an excessive amount of distortion and instruments all fighting for the main melody. It felt chaotic, which captures the vibe Forces goes for thematically, but it's just not executed as well as I would have hoped. I would have loved more tunes in the style of Sonic Adventure 1 that had a more orchestral feel, which is what I personally love listening to, though the soundtrack is far from terrible, and I'm sure if you liked Fist Bump or any other track they've shown off, you'll enjoy most of the OST. For me, while it's decent, no track resonated with me to the point where I wanted to seek out the name and play on repeat until I got sick of it. On the other hand, the gameplay is something I'm more conflicted on than anything. For the most part, you can think of Forces as being divided into 3 sections: Classic Sonic, Original Character, and Modern Sonic. Each has their own style of play. Classic Sonic plays like he did in Generations, with 2D platforming without much mid-air horizontal momentum. Modern Sonic utilizes the boost formula found in Sonic Colors with a lot of on-rail type running and jumping, as well as trying to combine elements of 2D platforming that take advantage of his mid-air boost. The OC gameplay is more so another take on the boost formula, but with the character having weapons to attack enemies and solve puzzles. As a side note, the OC customization is easily one of my favorite parts of Sonic Forces. I just had so much fun trying to play the old Sonic game. You know, the best Sonic game. Go into Google right now, type in your first name followed by the hedgehog, and you'll find something delicious. You'll find something you'll enjoy. I loved seeing that in an official Sonic game. It was great. Going back to technicalities, Forces is a game that can never decide precisely what it wants to do with itself. By dividing the gameplay into 2 drastically different feels and design, as the OC and modern Sonic stages play very similarly to each other, and I don't know, I guess I would rather have a game centered around one or the other, not 2. I don't want to play a game with classic Sonic and Modern Sonic again. I'd rather have just one or the other. This way, the gameplay could be more focused, and more different levels could be implemented to develop the styles and keep them fresh and entertaining. When you split your resources and creativity in this manner, it only halves how much time can be put towards each, since now you have two different styles of play to satisfy. The game could have worked just with the OC style and Modern Sonic, with perhaps Classic Sonic being able to control like Modern Sonic as a way to show, like, I don't know, some character development through gameplay perhaps. Just after generations, I don't want to be torn between two different gameplay modes. I guess I'm just feeling a tad fatigued of Classic Sonic. Putting that bias aside, the gameplay is fine for what it is. Most of the design isn't particularly inventive or fascinatingly engaging, but if you just want an easy platforming title that allows you to go fast and try to improve your speed through the levels, then Forces might be your cup of tea. For me, it was never too enjoyable. It wasn't boring per se to get through these levels, quite the contrary, these levels make speeding through them as flashy as can be. Much of the charm from the gameplay comes from the visual flair the game tries to establish as you pull off stunts, go through loop-de-loops, and quickly bust through enemies. Ultimately, it comes down to how these levels were constructed, and since the majority are linear and rely on simple movement, they never struck a chord with me. I didn't hate playing through them, but I didn't like it either. It felt like I was just mindlessly going through the motions, like I was on that Toy Story ride at Disney World where I was taken on a tour of a bunch of different worlds, saw some new set pieces, and had minimal input on what was actually going on. The only thing that mattered in the end was how well you performed, or if you didn't die, as you progressed through the narrative. I was more interested in the plot than anything, which is alright. I just feel so conflicted on everything Forces has to offer because coming into it, I was hoping it would be great. I was hoping it wouldn't just play like a reskin Generations and would do something entirely new. You could argue the OCs are that, but they play the same way Modern Sonic does and are just as average. I enjoyed customizing them to my heart's content, so that's a positive, I suppose. Overall, I'm confused. I don't dislike Sonic Forces, but I wasn't thrilled about it. It existed, and I played it. It's there, I won't remember much of it in a month, and I don't want to replay it. Forces was painfully average. There's nothing wrong with it, but I wish it was more. I wish it was more inventive and creative. I wish it didn't try to pander so hard to nostalgia, and I just wanted it to be more enjoyable than it was in the end. I don't think I'd recommend Sonic Forces for $40 right now, honestly. If you can find it on sale or a price drop happens, pick it up and decide for yourself. As for me, I wasn't digging much of anything Forces was trying to accomplish besides the narrative. While the presentation, both visually and in terms of sound design, is fine and the gameplay is okay, I was just playing through it to review it. I don't think I would have played Forces if I didn't have to, which I guess I don't, but y'all wanted to hear my thoughts, so I hope I didn't disappoint. If what I've shown off looks interesting to you, then by all means, pick it up. But if you're looking for something to keep your attention throughout with unique elements, this is not the game. Anyways, if you disagree or agree with me, let me know in the comment section below. I'm always willing to have a chat if you're willing to give me the time and not the anger. Thank you so much for watching and take care. Have a wonderful day. And I hate Sonic. I don't hate Sonic. I really wish this game was good so I could recommend it and prove that I'm not a Sonic apologist, that it was a great game. And I was... Alright, bye.